Ready too.
Tonight's speaker is Bruce Lauer and Rene Lauer. The history of the Lauer Foundation began decades ago. And by the way, I'm cheating on my introduction here. I'm borrowing somebody else's writing. Bruce began his lifelong interest in paleontology back in the 1970s, collecting fossil concretions around Mason Creek. As a member of the ESCONI club, his interest in collection of fossils grew to include scientifically important specimens. Bruce and Rene Lauer recognized that their collection contained scientifically important specimens, and they sought to find a solution to provide permanent access to these specimens for science and to properly curate the collection. Their collection provides a rare glimpse at the biota of two important fossil locations in Germany, which is the Jurassic Age, and Mason Creek in Illinois, which is the Carboniferous Age. And with that brief introduction, I'm going to turn the floor over to Bruce and Rene.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. This was a long project to try to put things together, and I think, as John and others and Andrew have said, you know, one of the best ways to learn more about something is to put together a presentation. I wanted to start off by acknowledging my son, Bobby, who, without him, you would not be looking at this PowerPoint that we finally got up on the screen.
And it is also his birthday today.
Yeah, and it is Bobby's birthday today. Anyway, anyway, let's start out. I call this presentation a snapshot in time. It kind of is a throwback to an exhibition we did with Burpee. And, you know, Solnhofen is one of the most iconic and famous fossil locations in the world, has a rich history, and has produced Archaeopteryx, one of the most iconic fossils, which really helped link dinosaurs to birds. Oops, uh-oh, it's gonna let me. Oh, it's not gonna let me turn the page. Oh, no.
You can use your up and down arrow keys also.
Yeah,
keyboard.
It's not doing anything.
Hmm.
Great. So,
What is this over here?
it's just me talking. May have
Going to pause for a moment.
Yeah. Yes. So, on this slide, you can see the some of the things that are historic and interesting about Solnhofen. On the left is the Berlin Archaeopteryx, pretty iconic. People recognize that. But in the middle and on the side are some historical drawings of the Solnhofen quarries. And you can see these little huts that the quarrymen used to do. And what's really interesting about it is on the left-hand side, you see these slabs here, and these are slabs with fossils on it. And it suggests that that even at this time, the quarrymen would put these slabs out of fossils for sale. So the presentation is tending to be an overview of the Solnhofen fossils and their deep history. We'll cover about how I got interested in Solnhofen a little bit more in detail. And also, what is a Lagerstätte? Although I know John went over this in one of his speeches, we'll go over that again. Solnhofen has a long history. And we talk a little bit about geology, some of the notable scientists, and you can see the rest of the things we're going to talk about, so I won't spend time on that. So how did I get interested in Solnhofen fossils? As we heard earlier, I started collecting fossils when I was young and joined the ESCONI Downers Grove Juniors group. And at that point in time, it was headed by Bill Popp. My father ended up being field trip chairman for ESCONI for a number of years, and we participated in many field trips. Obviously, at that time in the 70s, it was much easier to collect at different spots. So, we clearly collected at Mason Creek, at Pit 11, Morris, Clam Flats. The Detroit Mineral Show at the time was quite a big show. It doesn't exist anymore. It was much like the Denver show, but not quite as big as the Tucson show. So I was introduced to Solnhofen material by a Swiss dealer, and his name is Kirby Sieber. Now, Kirby is has a museum in Switzerland, and so he's been in the business a long time. What I was attracted to was the preservation of the Solnhofen fossils, and just such excellent preservation. Obviously, at this point in time, considering I was still in high school, I couldn't collect myself, so I saved my money to buy specimens. And Kirby at the time seemed to be the only one that had any Solnhofen fossils here available in the U.S. At this time, I was displaying competitively back in the 70s. The Midwest Federation show and the American Federation show had a really extensive competitive system for fossils, lapidary, all sorts of things. And this is a scorecard from the 1976 convention that was in St. Louis. And at this particular one, I had been displaying for a number of years, and I had wanted to show my Solnhofen material. And so I found a special category, specialized fossils, and I was going to display arthropods from Solnhofen. And one of the judge's comments was, variety in your chosen phylum should be greater, essentially. They were schooling me that, there was 188 or 180 insects available, and I only had one. And, no arachnids were displayed, which was an interesting comment because there's hardly any in that particular area. So anyway, that sort of incentivized me into trying to expand the collection. Just to note, the foundation now has 406 vertebrate fossils, 1,725 invertebrates, and 118 plant fossils, all from the Solnhofen area. So I think we did address the variety issue. What is a Lagerstätte? That was coined in 1970 by Adolf Seichler. Lagerstätte comes from the German Lager meaning storage and Stadt meaning place. The singular, you hear Lagerstätte and Lagerstätten sort of interchangeably. The singular version is Lagerstätte and the plural is Lagerstätten. There's two types of Lagerstätten. One, the conservate Lagerstätten, which is used when a location has exceptional preservation. So Solnhofen would be an example of that, as well as Mason Creek and Green River. Basically concentrate in German, Lagerstätte, is used when a location has a high concentration of fossils, perhaps like a bone bed, something like that, but doesn't necessarily require exceptional preservation.
Lagerstätte.
So why is Solnhofen famous? Well, it has a lot of historical significance. Many people recognize Solnhofen as a fossil locality in Germany. As we'll see,
Lagerstätte.
I don't know what's that.
She's mute.
Oh, hang on. I think that might be something here.
I don't know. That's gonna be fun.
Okay. Many people, as we will see, Solnhofen is simply one of many towns in the area. People know Solnhofen as the locality where Archaeopteryx was found. This was again, the link between dinosaurs and birds. In the past, people knew Solnhofen for the limestone that was quarried there. And then early scientists and collectors were fascinated by the fossils that coming from these quarries, as we showed in that historical picture. Not all Solnhofen fossils are actually from Solnhofen. as you can see here, Solnhofen is on the western edge of the Altmühl River Valley. And you can see that a lot of these quarries go all the way over here, almost to Regensburg. And so there's a lot of different quarries here. Eichstätt is right here, and Morsheim is in here, and these are all very famous quarries. Archaeopteryx is one of the most iconic and important fossils, as we talked about. This is really a list of all the different known specimens at this point in time. In fact, there's a couple more to be added. The first discovery was a single feather that was found in 1860 or 1861. It was described in 1861 by a gentleman named Hermann von Meyer. The first skeleton known was the London specimen, and that was found in 1861, described in 1863 by Richard Owen. Darwin used this specimen to boost his theory of evolution. Other than the feather, the unofficial names of the specimens follow the convention of where they are housed. For instance, the London specimen, the Berlin specimen, and so on. Officially, there's 12 specimens plus the feather. 11 of the 12 have feathers on them. As we said, the feather was found in 1860 to 1861. The London specimen was found in 1861 in Langenaltheim. The Berlin specimen was found in 1874 to 1875 in the Blumenberg quarry, which is near Eichstätt. The Maxburg specimen was found in 1956 near in the quarry in Langenaltheim. Interestingly enough, the Maxburg specimen was in a museum for the longest time and is currently missing. That museum closed and nobody's sure where that specimen went. The fifth one is the Haarlem specimen, which is in from Reidenberg, that was found in 1855. This one is not Archaeopteryx. It's really been redescribed as Astromia. So it's really not Archaeopteryx. The sixth specimen is the Eichstätt specimen, and you jump all the way to 1951 when that was found, and that was found in a quarry called Workersell, north of Eichstätt. The Solnhofen specimen was found in the 1970s in Eichstätt, in Eichstätt. The Munich specimen was found in 92, again in Langenaltheim. So that's 3 from that same quarry. There was a specimen found in a quarry in Deiting in 1990. It's just a partial specimen. The Burgermeister Müller Museum specimen was found in 2000. They call that the chicken wing because it's just a wing that was found. And then you may have heard of the Thermopolis specimen, which spends a lot of its time in Thermopolis, Wyoming. That was found in 2005, and the location where that's found has not been disclosed. And then there's 2 more, number 12 and 13, found in 2011 and 2010, one location unknown and the other in Schamhaupten quarry. Both are held in private collections in Germany. So one reason the scientists and collectors get access to fossil specimens is because there is a commercial reason to quarry the stone, and that's pretty typical of most fossil collecting. This is especially true for Solnhofen limestone. The fine-grained limestone was used for many purposes and will be discussed a little bit later. The limestone was mined for floor and wall tile. It was mined for roofing tile, and most importantly at the time it was mined for lithographic plates for printing. Collectors and scientists were fascinated with fossils from the many quarries. Early collectors and scientists tended to be physicians. Many would have their own so-called cabinet of curiosities. So the collection of Solnhofen fossils has a very long history. And these are some of the very earliest collectors. Basilis Bessler started in 1561 through 1629. He lived near Nuremberg, Germany, and was a pharmacist. He was a publisher and a collector. His publisher was mainly on copper plates for plant fossils. Johann Jacob Bayer was a physician in Nuremberg. He collected from 1677 to 1735. And then Cosimo Alessandro Galini, 1727 to 1806. He was part of the royal family in Italy, and he described the so-called first flying dinosaur, which would have been a pterosaur. Again, this is a specimen that really shows the history of the location. This is a fish called Tharsis dubius. It's inscribed in the year 1543. You'll see that the Catholic Church was heavily involved with fossils in this area, and this was a convenient proof of the deluge in the Bible. The history of the Solnhofen area goes back a long time. The mining of the limestone goes for quite a while. This was all tied very heavily to the Catholic Church. So to this day, the collection at the Jura Museum in Eichstätt is owned by the Catholic Church and is managed by the Bavarian state as well. Our friend Dr. Helmut Tischler wrote a paper about the history of this area and the interconnection with the church, and it was published in the journal Archaeopteryx, which is the scientific journal of the Jura Museum. It's in German, but it is fascinating. Again, here's an example of a Solnhofen limestone. On the right-hand side, very elaborate calendars were produced by the Catholic Church every year, and they were carved in the limestone. And so this would have been obviously for the wealthy church members. But what's interesting about this is if you look at this bottom section here, this is a blow up of that. These cherubs here are holding plates, and on those plates are fossils from the Solnhofen area. The town of Eichstätt, it was the home of the bishop's residence, and to this day it has a seminary there. And in fact, this building, that red roof there, is the seminary. And you'll find in the town this beautiful fountain that's right by the seminary. And once again, here's the cherubs, and here you see the fossil fish. I think this was some sort of lobster, but again, showing the significance of what the fossils were at the time to the area. So where is Solnhofen? Most people probably understand where it is. Oops, sorry. Again, in Europe and southern Germany in the Bavaria region. So this is a blow up of southern Germany, and the Altmühl River Valley, where all these quarries are, lies just about in here between Munich and Nuremberg. So once again, we saw this map on the right before of all the different quarries. And again, here's Eichstätt, here's Solnhofen, and some Kelheim over here is where a lot of the quarries end up stopping on this side. This map shows during the Jurassic, the basins and kind of the reef area where these lagoons would be. So this again was an archipelago, and there would have been land masses up in this region and down in this region, but this would have been the Tethys Ocean, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. As I mentioned, the Altmill River runs through the area. This on the left is the Altmill River, and on the right, put this in for John's benefit. It is an ammonite with an Archaeopteryx found inside of it. But this is an area that is basically a nature park, provides cycling, rafting, and hiking opportunities for the general public. We have canoed down this, although our canoe adventure ended up being us in the water and the canoe going on its very own way. So that was not what we intended. Next, we'll take a look at the history of the Solnhofen quarries. The Solnhofen limestone has been quarried and used since at least the Roman times. Solnhofen limestone has many uses, as we had touched on, and the most important product of the area. Special guilds were set up to create rules for quarrying the limestone. Everyone in the community had a share in the limestone in the quarry. So that made things very interesting because you had a little section of the quarry that was yours. So they had to make up all sorts of rules as to how this was all going to work. As we talked about, limestone is used for tile, decorative sculptures, roof tiles, and lithographic presses. As a result, the fossils were discovered and became very important to the area as well. The town name of Solnhofen comes from the settlement of an Anglo-Saxon monk named Solus in 750. So that's this here. The earliest evidence of the utilization of Solnhofen limestone was from this Roman bath that was part of a fort near Wiesenberg, Germany. And this is the remains of the Sola Basilica from the 6th to 7th century. These are some pictures of the early quarrying activity. I can assure you it does not look like this now. This was back in the heydays, and you can see all the workers here. When you see this thicker limestone, this would have been the heydays of the lithographic limestone coming out. But you can see there was a lot of workers here, and you can see the types of slabs that they were able to pull up. Here you can see a picture of a giant fish they had found. Solnhofen tile has been used, as we mentioned, since Roman times. Many floors and buildings in churches in Europe are made with Solnhofen limestone. So you'll see a lot of, you'll see a lot of floors in churches that have the limestone on the bottom or on the walls. On the left-hand side, this is an example of the limestone being carved for a tombstone. This is a modern house in the Solnhofen area, and on the roof, much like slate is used, this is Solnhofen tiles that were used for the roof. Now, there was a very robust market for the tile itself, but the invention of lithographic printing put Solnhofen really on the world map. Certain quarries contain the fine-grained limestone slabs used for printing. A gentleman named Alois Sonnenfelde invented the lithographic printing method in 1798, and this really opened a new, very lucrative market. The limestone at the Solnhofen and Morsheim quarries had the traits of thick plates and consistent fine grains. This homogeneous structure was capable of handling the pressure of the printing presses, which you can see here. And here you can see probably a little bit more modern printing press in action. And you can see on the upper right, the quarry workers use like a metal grid to mark out the plate, and then they would work on trimming that plate down to that size because they needed to fit into the printing press. There's some examples of the plates on the left here. On the right is a plate that we happen to own, and what you would have is for a printing process, you would have a series of plates if you were going to do multicolors, so that certain areas would print different colors. But this is from a plate from one of my favorite German beers, Weinstefan. There's really literally hundreds and hundreds of quarries in the Solnhofen area. Germany has similar laws to the US in requiring old quarries to be backfilled when the quarry work is done. While this is true, if you walk through the forest, you would find a lot of very, very old abandoned quarries. The large quarries are mainly worked by immigrants. First the Italians, then the Yugoslavians, and then finally the Turkish worked in the quarries. Here's some pictures of some of the quarries. Like I said, hundreds exist. Eichstadt's probably one of the more famous ones. Harthof and Heineheim are another quarries. They all look very similar, but different quarries tended to have different things that were found there. On this page, you can see on the left, upper left is Langendalfheim, where they found 3 of the Archaeopteryx in this quarry. It is just a massive quarry. The quarry Reed is famous for starfish, and then the Pynton quarry on the bottom there has been part of a commercial dig we'll talk about. But you can see these yellow containers here. The limestone here really isn't good for tile or anything, and it's used mainly for concrete. So that's basically saccrete. That's why it's yellow. And then these are 3 more quarries. The Schamhaupten, again, Archaeopteryx was found there. The Schotterberg is a quarry that is mainly a hobby quarry, which we'll talk about, and Schoenfeld. Zant is a quarry we've been in, another famous quarry, as well as Wintershof. They all tend to start looking alike, but again, what you find in them can be quite different. So the quarry is really mined by workers who basically live in the quarry. The slabs are hand mined and tested by the ping of a hammer to see whether the slab is good for tile or not. This method of mining has been used throughout the ages, and in some cases, machinery is used to clear off the unwanted material. So you can see down here, they have a front loader here. So they'll go through and strip out a section here, quarry it by hand, and then toss the stuff that's not good for tile off to the side. During the season, the Turkish workers tend to live in the quarry. So you'll see in the quarries trailers here. And the interesting part is, these rough and tough quarrymen have lace curtains on their windows in their trailers. So the slabs that come out of the hand quarrying look like this up in the upper right. And those are just rough slabs that have come out. And then once they're processed and cut into the sizes required for the tile, they'll be stacked in another wooden crate. And a lot of this cutting ends up being done in these types of shelters there. This is in the Solnhofen Museum, and it's a recreation of kind of the area where they might be making this tile. This is actually from one of the quarries, and this was a gentleman that had worked in the quarry for a long time. You can see the guides they use for the different tile sizes, and here's the clippers he uses to cut
Okay.
those down. And it is quite the skill to be able to do it. And he gave me a try for it, and it took a lot to try to trim that down. And when you look at that guy's hands, he had calluses like you wouldn't believe from doing that for all those years. Let me go back here. One of the things that has happened is that more synthetic tile has come onto the market and really dampened the demand for Solnhofen tile. And the result of that is that, you know, in the past you had thousands of workers in the quarry, and now you have probably less than 50 workers in the quarry. So this has really had a significant impact on the number of new fossils found. So geologically, Solnhofen is Jurassic. So, and it's late Jurassic, so we're in here. And most of the quarries are Tithonian or Kimmeridgian. There's a little bit of Exfordian, but not very much. So we're mainly in these two areas. This is a deep time map. I apologize, it's a little fuzzy. I couldn't get a better resolution one. But here you can see the Solnhofen area would have been right in here. So you have this big landmass of Laurasia here, Gondwana down here, China's over here, and you have the Tethys Ocean here. And this is just the beginning of the Atlantic Ocean. So the archipelago of Solnhofen would have been in here. Again, here's the kind of the deep time map, and you can see, sorry, my mouse. You can see some of the quarries we talked about here, Deiting and Langenaltheim and Solnhofen. So you can see a little bit where these huge coral reefs were, and then the blue would have been the basins that these things were in. The stratigraphy of Solnhofen has been looked at over and over. You can it's one of those things where it's being reworked over and over, but on the right hand side you can see the different quarries, and they've mapped them to different horizons, and they've also mapped them to the ammonite zones. So you know, they've done a lot of work on this, but as anything in science, it keeps changing. This chart really shows where the different archaeopteryx were found and what layers, and you can see a lot of them were concentrated in a certain area. And again, the names of the formations seem like they change constantly, so I'm not going to go too deep into that. This was an interesting quarry that our friend Helmut Tischlinger took us to. And it's one of the few quarries in the area that shows almost all of the White Jurassic. And the White Jurassic really is all the sort of like the what you think of the normal Solnhofen limestones. And what's kind of neat about it is they've really mapped every bit of this quarry face, and you can almost hold the picture of the stratigraphy up against the quarry face to see that. So that was very interesting. This is a kind of a close-up of some quarry walls. This was in the Zant quarry, and you can see how this has been deposited, and in this particular instance, how almost consistent the thickness of these layers were. But the other thing I wanted you to see was notice how these cracks, and these cracks and fractures are all throughout things. So this is one of the things that contributes to the fact that a lot of the fossils you find, and especially the bigger ones, do not come out in one piece. They're usually fractured some way or another. They also sometimes have these big crevices in the rock. And I know in one of the quarries we went to, there were people that were extracting the material out of these crevices because these would have been inlaid with Pleistocene material. Now, the other thing about some of the quarries is that, as you can see on the left-hand side, you see the horizontal deposits here, and then it gets all messed up. You see that over here. And there's different schools of thought about what happened here. A lot of people historically have think that massive storms have caused that disruption there. But a lot of people now think that maybe this was just simply gravity, that you had all this fine material, and as it built up and built up, if there was any slope whatsoever, it might have just slid down and slid over itself. So that's still kind of in discussion. The Solon, as we mentioned before, the Solnhofen area was an archipelago. The upper Jurassic was a period of rising and falling sea levels, coupled with a climate change from warm and humid to semi-arid. For many years, the quarries were thought to be a lagoon deposit. Lagoons are basins that are mostly or entirely separated from the open sea by barriers like sand or coral reefs. The lagoons had layers of water, and lower layers were anaerobic. Animals falling to the lower layers were not scavenged before they were buried, which gave you all this beautiful preservation. The concept of lagoons is contested now, and many researchers now think the quarries were basins. Basins are an indentation bowl like a structure, but mainly underwater. But many may have parts sticking out of the water. Basins would be exposed to the open sea, which is the big difference between basins and lagoons. So with changing sea levels, this would impact the basins, and both basins and lagoons could have anaerobic layers of water. So I think there's a lot more work to be done. The paleobiota is diverse. The Solnhofen area produces fossils from algae to Archaeopteryx. It is a mix of plants, terrestrial, and marine animals. At times, the water would dry up, and this created the salinity and anaerobic conditions. If a basin dried out, insects may land in the sticky carbonate mud and then subsequently get buried again. This is another picture of the area. And again, you can see here the archipelago of the Solnhofen area and the impact of the Tethys Ocean coming in on this. You know, as I previously talked about, the fossils found in the quarries near the Solnhofen area attracted a lot of attention. Many physicians and nobles were interested in them and accumulated vast collections. Many became scientists who would describe and name the fossils. The heyday was really the 17 to 1800s. Here's some pictures of some of the more famous collectors and scientists. And what you'll find is that a lot of these, if you look at some of the fossil species names, the last names here show up quite a bit. So they were very active in the initial description of many of the fossils. Now, this page has two very famous people on it, the Haberlins. So Carl, the father, and this was his son Otto, were physicians, and they were very much Solnhofen collectors. Carl was a doctor in Solnhofen, and he treated local miners, and it's kind of hypothesized that he was paid in the form of fossils. In any case, he was local to the area, so had access to the workers. The Haberlins had several collections. One was sold to the Bavarian state in Munich in 1857. Carl sold the London specimen of Archaeopteryx, along with 1,756 other specimens, to the British Museum in 1862 for £700. Otto Haberlin, his son, continued this, and his he sold specimens to Harvard and Yale in 1890 and 1892. Now you may recognize one of the guys on this page, Agassiz. It seems like Louis Agassiz was everywhere, and he had his hand in the Solnhofen area as well. The Solnhofen area has had a history of having scientific digs at some of the quarries. They tend to operate for many years over the summer, and they're very heavily dependent on funding. The finds were curated and prepared at the museums, but as the museums had very little money to pay for preparation, preparers were often paid in kind with duplicate specimens. Also, many times the digs were concurrent with private collectors in quarries such as Etling. So that is why sometimes you will see that people have specimens from these scientific digs. These are some of the digs that have been going on. Brunn up there was by the Bavarian State. One that is active right now is Neusplingen by the Stuttgart Museum. And below that, the Wattendorf quarry by the Bamberg Museum. The Diding is basically done. We've been in that quarry and it's pretty much done. Falls Pint was a quarry that was very famous for its jellyfish that were found there. That was done by the Solnhofen Museum. And Etling was by the Jura Museum. The Solnhofen area has a lot of hobby quarries, and they have one commercial dig that we're aware of. The hobby quarries are open to visitors who can collect, just generally a fee to collect, and many quarries will reserve the right to keep any significant finds. Some quarries even provide hammers and chisels. This is one of the quarries. We saw a picture of this earlier, the Schotterberg quarry. It is near Mulheim, which is not far from Solnhofen. They have a small shop in there. They have a beer garden. The quarry is notable for its many finds, including Elvis, which was a pterosaur that we had a paper on this year, which was found just in this area of the quarry. Yeah, pterosaur. They also, the owners of this quarry also have their own private quarry that they dig in. There's other hobby quarries, both in Solnhofen here, and then there's one in Eichstätt in Blumenberg. And as you can see, a lot of the elementary schools in Germany will bring their kids out to actually go collecting in the quarries. Schamhaupten is actually now a collector's quarry. There's no fee associated with it, but there is a kind of a understanding that if you find something that has a value of a certain amount, half of that has to go to the city. I don't know how they enforce that, but somehow or another. But archaeopteryx was found at this quarry as well. The only commercial dig we're aware of is the Pinton quarry, and that dig has been active for over 20 years. It's a particularly rich area of the quarry that they're digging in. And the dig's financed by a man named Raymond Elbersdorfer, and over the years, he's found many extraordinary specimens here. He has 3 people that work from the spring to the fall, and even so, it's an area where the fossils are still very rare. Sorry. This again is the Pine Quarry. We happen to have the opportunity to go there, and here's Renee, where she actually found a Thrysops fish that day, although that required quite a bit of prep. Sorry. Museums, there are a lot of museums in the Solnhofen area. With this long history of fossils and things, you can imagine that this was just ripe for museums. So here's a list of different museums. Some of them are close. Obviously, Berlin and Stuttgart aren't right in that area, but there's quite a few there. This is the Bamberg Museum and some of the specimens that are found there. The Berlin Museum, which is a beautiful museum. And of course, they have the Berlin archaeopteryx there. This is the Dino Park in Deckendorf. And they generally have rotating exhibitions there and a whole dinosaur experience. But they generally have some Solnhofen material there. Most of what's in there is from Pynton because Raymond's involved with this. This is the Euro Museum in Eichstätt. And this is the some of the collection area, which interestingly enough, as I mentioned, this collection area is in the basement of the seminary. Bavarian State Museum in Munich. It's not really a museum, although you can see things. I was lucky enough here. This is the Munich archaeopteryx specimen. I was able to see that. And of course, because it's been around so long, a lot of holotypes of things that were described by all those old scientists reside here. This is the Berger Museum near Eichstätt. He is a quarry owner that was very interested in fossils, so he has his own little museum. And of course, the Solnhofen Museum is a must-see as well. The biota, finally look at a few specimens. The collection consists of over 2,200 specimens. We talked before how many vertebrates and things we have, so I won't spend time on that. Here's some examples of the things we have. On the left is an undescribed plant, which we're actually hoping the Field Museum is going to do some work on all these undescribed plants that we have. Zimites, it's a cycad, it's not a fern that was, from the area. But here we go from algae on. So we have algae, we have some soft sponges, codites, we have jellyfish, we have octocoral, which you can sort of see the outline of it. And this was like a hard coral that would be like on a stalk that would kind of float in the ocean and feed that way. Worms, brachiopods, bivalves, gastropods, ammonites. Here's a nautilus for John. Squids, insects, dragonflies with incredible preservation, grasshoppers. This is a wasp-like creature, which is the counterpart to the holotype. Remember that a lot of times when you split these fossils, you may have two sides to it, just like you have a Mason Creek concretion. Crabs. This is an interesting, very much rarer than Archaeopteryx. These are not claws or anything, but these are these weird antennae that this Cancrenos crab had. Cyclerian, another crab. Shrimps, horseshoe crabs, crinoids, and starfish. Sea urchins, just beautifully preserved. Brittle stars. A lot of rock shows you'll find brittle stars from Solnhofen for sale. This is a acorn worm, a hemichordate. This is again the counterpart to the holotype. Ratfish, chimera. We found individual shark's teeth and then holomorphic entire sharks and small sharks, angel type sharks. And as you can tell, this one came from my son, sharks not from Solnhofen. A lot of different types of moonfish. Again, remember there was reefs around there. So we have Gerotus up in the upper right. Again, all sorts of moonfish. This is Lepidotes, huge scales on these. This is Thrysops, salmon-like fish from Etling. And some of these Etling fish almost preserve the color of the fish in them, and they're amazing. Coelacanths. By the way, all these are in the collection. Turtles, juvenile turtles, lizards, pterosaurs. The pterosaur on the left there is called Darkwing. That is not in the collection, but it's one where they almost feel like the preservation of the circulatory system in the wings was preserved. The skull on the right was a filter feeder. As you can tell, those are teeth sticking out of the if you will, the bill of it. Crocodiles, the one on the left is not ours, but the one on the right is. Ichthyosaurs. And then these are some of the behaviors you sometimes see in Solnhofen. Because of the excellent preservations, you can see this horseshoe crab, and you can see where it came down and started to walk along here. So now there's a lot of discussion about whether, oh, is this the death tracks to where it died? Was it molting? Did it just walk across when the basin dried out? There's a lot of discussion about what's really going on here. This is a long-armed crab, and this is the remnants of a molting. So it flopped down there on the bottom, and it molted, and then swam away. So this is just the molting skin of the lobster. Now the collector scene in the Solnhofen area is pretty robust. I would say it's very similar to the Maison Creek collector scene, probably in the 60s and 70s. And hopefully now with the renaissance of it all coming around again. This is a good friend of ours, Dr. Helmut Tischlinger, and Dr. Martin Gorlick, who are people we work with continuously. There's other collectors. We call Roger Fratigiani the shrimp man. He spends 4 weeks a year of his vacation in the quarries collecting. He collects primarily shrimp, and he's had several species named after him. And as a result of that, he decided to tattoo on his calf one of his shrimps that were named after him. These are other collectors. Stefan Schaefer, you can see he's holding Darkwing, and Dr. Martin Garlick. And this is Stefan Seltzer, one of the best preppers of German material in the world, and our friend Udo Resch down here. And of course, we collect as well. Preparation. Solnhofen fossils are not easy to prepare. The limestone can be very hard or very soft. Specimens are often found fractured in many pieces. While the stone looks like Green River matrix, it is very different, requiring special tools. Many times fossils are inlaid in another more aesthetic limestone slab. In some cases, parts may be missing and be reconstructed. Here's an example of a very difficult preparation and even a difficult extraction. We happened to be in the area when they found this crocodile. And most of it, you can see here's a picture of Rene with it. Most of it is in one of these crevices and was inlaid with just mud and things in between this. So part of it's in the limestone, part of it's not. And so they ended up having to try to pull this out. And what they ended up doing is putting resin over it so they could extract it. And here's a picture of it once they got into the workshop. Now, a simpler picture is here's a picture of an unprepped fish. And you can see it's, you know, to a certain extent, it looks like Green River, where you'd have to prep all this out, which is what you have to do, but it's just very hard material. So this is a preparation lab. This is our prepper here, and the point of this is working under a microscope. It's important that you work on this under a microscope and using UV light so that you don't destroy any soft tissue. Ultraviolet light in Solnhofen fossils. So the ultraviolet light is a useful tool when dealing with many fossils, and especially Solnhofen fossils. Is used as a tool to detect soft tissue preservation, hopefully preserve it as it might be lost in preparation. It's also a powerful tool to help detect restoration that may have been done on a fossil. But it is a tool that requires use of safety procedures, and you really need an adequate knowledge of the anatomy of the fossil and a microscope and magnification. What is UV? Well, there's A, B, and C, and here you can see it's measured in nanometers or NM, and you can see the different wavelengths. And again, you need to be very careful when you're using UV and use safety glasses and skin protection. This was a poster that Rene put together for the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology, and it really described how we use UV light in the foundation and kind of our setup for taking pictures. This is our kind of our lab for UV photography, and we use we have a camera stand, as you can see, and then we have a 95-watt UV light, which has both A, B, and C to photograph the specimens. And each wavelength can produce different results. And the orange filter helps to take the purple tint out. And obviously a dark room helps reduce reflection of the UV. This is an example, or actually Rene's used this a couple times in different posters and talks, of what UV can do for you. You can see on this side, this is a shrimp that came right out of the quarry, but you can sort of see the body here, but you don't really see much. But look what happens when you put it under UV. You can see all the antenna. There was no prep done. That's just the way it is under UV. This is another example. This is a pterosaur foot. And you know, it's a beautiful specimen in daylight. And then when you look under UV, what do you see? You see the soft tissue between the toes. And this has helped confirm the fact that the pterosaurs had webbed feet. This is another example of a shark. This is a juvenile shark. And under daylight, this looks great, but looks what pops out when you look under UV. These are the gill rakers of the shark that have been preserved. This is a example of the inlay and some restoration. This is a beautiful Cyclerian lobster, and it's on this beautiful slab with the dendrites around it. It's just a gorgeous piece. But when you look at it under UV, you see some things. You notice that the tops of the claws don't show up. The tail's got a different color to it. And you see blue all the way around it. Well, the blue all the way around it is highly indicative of it being inlaid. So this had been cut out of another piece and then inlaid into that beautiful slab. And here you can see that this looks kind of suspicious. Now, all UV tells you is that you better go look at this under magnification to see if that's been restored or if there's some other reason it doesn't show like the rest of it. We're getting to the end. The Lauer Foundation makes its collection available to researchers. we actually go a step further and we actively seek out researchers to work on important specimens. We work with various institutions on exhibitions, and the exhibitions may be simply by loaning specimens to be included in an exhibit or an entire exhibit. One of our first entire exhibits was with the Burpee Museum, and we called it a snapshot in time. We worked with Scott Williams and Josh Matthews to put that together. And we were lucky enough to have Hans-Dieter Seuss from the Smithsonian come out and give the opening day lecture on that. It was very nice of him. Here's an example we do with just loaning some things. If you've been to the Field Museum lately, you can see that those two pterosaurs in the background are from the foundation and have been on a long-term loan with them. The Ura Museum had a special exhibition, and they were trying to highlight the various types of collectors. And so we were kind of in between a private collector and a museum. And so they were interested in us. And so we had this beautiful lizard on display there. And the interesting thing is they wanted us to do a video to explain the foundation and stuff. And Rene and I worked on that for a long time and had a very difficult time. And our oldest son helped edit it, and he said the only thing stiffer in that movie was then the rocks was us. So he goes, I don't think we're going to show you very much. We'll show something else on top of it. Just save your voice. Research papers. This was Elvis. This was our most recent research paper. This is a holotype. This is Dave Hone from the UK working on it. And this was when Elvis was just out of the quarry. And it's named Elvis because of this crest it's got. This is the artist's recreation from one of the authors, Freddie Spindler, put that together. This again was when it came out of the quarry. This is Oliver Rahut from the Munich Museum. But Rene was a co-author on this paper, and it is a holotype that we hold in the collection. There's another paper on a Hybotis that we worked with Chris Duffin on. This is another holotype. This is a Chimera twin egg case from Germany. Again, Chris Duffin described that. And J.P. Brown from the Field Museum did the photogrammetry for us on that. This was one of the first papers that was done. Rene was the co-author on this with, and this is a pelagic crocodilomorph. And this was a picture with 3 of the 4 authors. Unfortunately, the 4th author had passed away. And then we have a series of posters that we've done for the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology on different specimens or outreach programs on UV, all sorts of things. And those are our references. So I am done. I'm open for questions, and maybe I stop sharing and then we can see everybody.
How come some of the museums are closed?
One of them, the museum, you know, a lot of these museums are private museums, and I think it all depends on whether they have funding or they don't have funding. And the Maxburg collection went to one that was in another town, and when that closed up, then somehow or another that Maxburg Archaeopteryx disappeared. There's a lot of there's a lot of people that think they know where it is, but it's a very kind of secretive thing. So
I like reopen some of it.
Well, no, that particular museum's closed permanently, but the rest of the museums are open. You know, the bigger ones like Berlin and Stuttgart are going to be open. the Solnhofen one and the Jura, they tend to close over the winter because they just don't have tourists. So they
Probably more
close
staffing.
down January, February, probably open in
And
March.
you,
And most of
and
the
you
year,
said that museum is closed permanently. What will become of the fossils?
Well, that's the
That's the
question.
question.
And of course, that's why a lot of scientists have problems with private collectors and private institutions. And that's kind of the difference we've done, is that we've kind of established a succession plan and things to make sure that the specimens will be available in perpetuity for research. And
I hope
that's
so.
and that's
So-
one of the reasons we can hold holotypes and things like that.
we've met those requirements.
I hope the fossil will protect us soon. We don't want to get damaged. They'll find specimen.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Questions?
Yeah, Bruce, I had a question. You mentioned early on something about the guilds, and I wondered
Yeah.
if that meant people own, like individually or families own sections of quarry.
Yes.
Did they work cooperatively when it came to moving the commercial material?
Yes, and that was the purpose of these guilds. I mean, the thing about, like in the village, if there was a quarry in the village, everybody in the village owned a portion of that. And
Mhm.
so you have these people that maybe were farmers and did other things, but then would go and quarry. And, if you had, just this, 20-foot wide section, then how did this work? And so they had, a huge rule book of this is how it works. And then I think then it morphed into more of a co-op where, everybody just worked the area and maybe split it up or something,
And to that point, I was going to ask, is there any documentation that if a very special fossil was found, was the proceeds shared in that case, since it was kind of cooperative mining? Or do you know if they were, if things were sold individually, it's like finders keepers?
I think it was finders keepers. I mean, even today, I mean, I would say 99% of the fossils that come out of the Solnhofen quarries today and probably the last 200 years were taken out by the workers. And the feeling was, the quarry owners made their money and they didn't pay the workers very much. And the side part of it was they got to keep the fossils. That was all fine and good when it was an Ager shrimp or something like that. But when it came to an Archaeopteryx, that became a whole nother deal. So that, there, even to today, I mean, the Turkish workers, they'll come out, they'll find something and the dealers there have to go down there at night and go take a look at it and decide. And the bad thing about it is that if you're a dealer and most of this is not collected by individuals, you'll find some stuff, but because they're so far between, it's you can go like Roger, who goes there for 4 weeks a year, he may find a couple shrimp or something, but that's it. He doesn't find a lot.
Oh.
And
Abundant like it is for Green River and some of these other places.
Right.
so a lot of this just, it comes out, on the side, and the dealers have to go and basically buy everything or they don't get called anymore. So they need to have
A network.
a network to dispose of the more commercial stuff. And that's what you're going to see at the rock shows.
Right.
Is that kind of stuff.
Right.
The other thing too is you've got a number of people that, maybe had a collection and they're getting old up in years and you find that their family doesn't want it. They don't, the kids don't want it at this point. If you're lucky, if they've documented it properly, maybe it finds its way to a museum. If not, they just want it disposed of. If it's of any value at all, then maybe it comes up on a secondary market. And I think that's happening maybe more often now. We're certainly not finding a lot of material in the quarries anymore because there's so few people working in the quarries. Amateurs can collect and they can sell sell it if they want, given the approval of the quarry. But I think you've got a secondary market that's coming up with material that was in somebody's collection that's now coming back out because nobody in the family wants it.
Well, remember too, you used to have thousands of workers, and now you have 50 workers. And if, the general rule is a worker in the quarry may once a year find a special fossil, once a year.
Wow.
So, so what you find now is, like Rene said, is a lot of these collectors have been collecting for 50 years, and they upgrade, they get better stuff. Or in the case, part of our collection came from one individual, a guy that was, he basically was like a dealer. He would go down and had the connections to get material. He would keep the very best for himself and then had channels to get rid of the rest. And he did this for, 30 years. And he had amassed this huge collection. Well, he died of a heart attack at 52 or something. And, none of the family was interested, but they realized that it was valuable. And so then there was a matter of what are you going to do with it? He wanted to go to a museum, but the ex-wife and the daughter weren't so keen on that because they knew it was worth some money. And so, one of the dealers there found the best solution he could, tried to keep it together. Well, it was a very, very big collection. So half of it came to us and half of it went to the guy who owns the Thermopolis Archaeopteryx. So it's in two spots. And then the other part of it is that collection was, that deal was done with the blessing of Stuttgart and Munich. So Stuttgart got to look through, that museum got to look through the things, and they took the dragonflies that they needed for their collection out of that before it would ever come anywhere else. So when we're doing these types of acquisitions, they're done under the auspices of, maybe not officially, but under the auspices of the museums in Germany. Plus then they know where it is.
Right. Right. And like you said, the Lauer Foundation makes available your collection to research, et cetera. So it's accessible. One last observation / question. We celebrate Mary Anning of Lyme Regis, England today, but in her day, it was a lot of the gentleman scientists, right, who were priests and doctors, et cetera, who would make inexpensive acquisitions and then donate them to the British Museum or Paleontological Society, et cetera. And I'm wondering if some of these early scientists, whom you said a lot of the specimens were named after, if it was a similar thing. They're essentially acquiring or procuring the fossils from the workers and then donating them under their name or having them research. I mean, were they scientists, as in, like, were they writing the papers themselves, or were they sort of just transacting the fossils in that case?
I think the early on ones were, well, first of all, they were fascinated by them. And I think given that they were, professionals, being physicians or pharmacists or something like that, and had sort of a scientific background, they were interested in these in the first place. And I think a lot of them went from what you might call amateur scientists to, professional, and maybe not in degree, but then would describe things. Now, did they always describe them correctly? No, but
that's science.
But that,
science evolves.
Right.
Yeah.
Learn from each thing. And that's what, but that's what's recorded until you know more.
But I think collectors like the Haberlins have been kind of characterized as more, while they were collectors and stuff, they were clearly out to make money. And so, while, 700 pounds doesn't sound like much for that collection, at that time, it was a lot of money. So, but, on the flip side, it ended up in a museum. Same with the sale they did one to Munich, and then they sold Yale and Harvard. So, So that's why, sometimes when the museums, people get a little up in their arms about, oh, you shouldn't be buying fossils and doing things. I'm like, museums have done that for hundreds of years.
Bruce, how deep is the fossil layer go?
Well, when you go in the quarries, it's probably 200-300 feet at least of material. And of course, you have all the different layers there. So there's going to be some that have more fossils than others, but like the Berger quarry, we've been in that on the bottom. And as we went down, remember I talked about the white Jurassic? And then of course the black Jurassic is more what you see in the UK. But as you go down in these quarries, you get some darker, almost grayish layers, and the preservation, while it's really good, is almost more organic. You see almost like a carbon type imprint of some of the things. So it was funny when we went in the quarry, we're sort of in there, and Berger himself is very picky about who's in his quarry. So his son is like the foreman. He comes down in a pickup truck. And so we're down there, and the two of the Turkish workers knew one of the guys we were with. And we explained to the Berger's son that we were tourists in all we wanted to do is see where they find the fossils and stuff like that. And so Berger's son goes, well, yeah, you can look all you want here. He goes, and this was towards the bottom of the quarry. He goes, when these things died, they all floated to the top. So you're never going to find anything at the bottom of the quarry. They're all at the top of the quarry. And we go, oh, thank you very much for that wise information you're telling us. We'll just continue to look here. And then
That's
of course, the Turkish guys didn't hear that we were tourists. They heard that we were terrorists. And so that so they've always joked about the two terrorists that
came around,
were in the quarry. So
well, and they're always a little intrigued, having a girl in there. And that was actually the Euro Museum had closed for some time, and then when they reopened, they named a new director, and that director wanted to bring people back into the fold. She wanted to show that fossils are meant to be admired and appreciated by everybody of all walks of life, of all ages. And so she opened an exhibit that was showing people from childhood all the way up through professionals and museum staff, all working in different capacities that were enjoying fossil collecting, preparing, curating, whatever the niche was. She said, I'd like to include you in the poster, and they included me in it because they were intrigued with it. There was a woman working in the quarries, and they invited us to then exhibit in that exhibition. So we were very, very honored, very touched by that, and they've been incredibly gracious and kind to us. And so we like to keep those connections open there. I think we all learn a lot more by having many eyes on these things to learn and appreciate from one to the other.
Yeah.
I've been thinking, you said that archaeologist spot was missing, right? Disappeared. What if it was stolen?
I would argue it was stolen.
I think in the same way, maybe it's been stolen. I knew it missing museum, so they haven't slipped one with the missing paint that was stolen. They don't know what happened to them. Still mystery.
Yeah. Well,
they've been stolen probably to some black market.
Oh yeah. Well, see, the problem with Archaeopteryx on the black market, everybody would know exactly what this thing is, and so I mean, you're not gonna be able to sell it. The other thing is, in Germany, Archaeopteryx is a cultural heritage item. So an Archaeopteryx that's found in Germany has to stay in Germany. Doesn't have to be in a museum, but it has to stay in Germany. And there's certain exceptions, like for instance, the one in Thermopolis, the guy who owns it is a native German, so he's German, but somehow or another he had gotten it out. And so, you know, the law came into effect, I don't know, maybe
What year?
15, 20 years ago. So, you know, it's the same thing. If you could prove it was found, you know, was not in Germany 20 years ago, that would be okay. But in any case, so if you're trying to sell an Archaeopteryx in Germany, there's not really all the museums that want one have one, and private collectors, there's not very many that have enough money that they could afford one. So if you have it, in my old days,
Well,
I
it's just-
called it a very illiquid asset, because what are you going to do with it?
Well, I was just thinking because I thought maybe it was stolen. Maybe it's
Yeah.
just people it was stolen.
Well, it is. It's going to show up one of these days,
Mhm.
and there'll be some story around it, and it'll end up back somewhere. But don't forget that specimen's already been studied to the nth degree. It's just the fact that where is it right
It's
now?
missing. Yeah, but I will say though, you know, that happens far more often, and we run into this all the time, and I'm not gonna point any fingers because it's literally occurred in every institution we've been in. The number of times that something is missing, and it turns out it was just misfiled. It was put in the wrong drawer. And you know, this is one of those things that I'm really happy about, people going in and doing digitization, because it provides them with the opportunity to go through all the collections, update the cards, update the, you know, all the data and, you know, the names and everything, make sure that it's all accurate in their system, and get images of it. And so that allows it to be shared more widely and more freely between different researchers. But it also provides them with that opportunity to find where something's maybe been misfiled in just the wrong drawer. And I think that happens a lot, and it's an easy mistake to make. And I think that, you know, so if we go through more institutions are doing more of that process, I think we'll probably find more material that's actually still in the building somewhere.
Yeah.
Do they,
Couldn't agree with you
I-
more.
are there any other animals besides Archaeopteryx that are restricted to come out of Germany?
No, that's the prime one. I think if we have anything that was, you know, highly unusual, it would have to go through Munich, Oliver Rahu, in order for it to be exported.
Mhm.
I mean, on the flip side, when things come into the US, when we get a crate in from Germany, if our border has any questions, the person they go ask is Hans Dieter Seuss. So that's helpful to us.
There's just still checks and balances.
Yeah. So I mean, but Archaeopteryx is the prime thing that they're concerned about.
But I think that we're putting way too much focus on one thing. This is about many things, and it's an incredibly rich biodiverse locality, and it's got incredible preservation of things that shouldn't preserve, like jellyfish, and all these other soft-bodied creatures, and that to me is far more fascinating. We get asked all the time, you know, what's your favorite? And that's a really hard call, because we have a lot of favorites. So it kind of changes from week to week, depending on what I'm working on at the moment. But you know, we've been doing a lot of work on pterosaurs lately, but actually one of the things that intrigues me the most are the dragonflies, because I'm absolutely blown away that something as fine as a dragonfly wing could ever possibly preserve and show all that venation. So I really want to have, you know, let's have a cheer for the invertebrates, because I don't think they get their fair due.
Yeah.
One of the more interesting things that occur at Solnhofen, more than probably other places, are aptekai, like jaws, and what some think double as the operculum
Yeah.
of the ammonite. And I've purchased several different types, including a small one of the ammonite itself, and it's actually attached with the jaws.
Yeah.
They're not that common to find.
No.
And the Solnhofen ones are quite large and very well preserved.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They really are. And, you know, we actually have a couple ammonites that oddly enough have preserved almost that iridescent outer, you know, shell to it. And for the preservation in Solnhofen, that's just crazy that you get that. But we actually have two specimens that have it. It's not like you see, you know, in South Dakota ones and all that,
Right.
but it's there.
It's more along the lines of like the mother of pearl, where you get that
Yeah.
sheen on the
Yeah.
outside. It's really interesting.
But yeah, we have a few interesting things coming along on the ammonite side. So
What's interesting is we mentioned the Pine Quarry. As we go through all these different quarries, they're very, very different from one another. The colors change, the texture of the stone changes, the amount of dendritic material patterns that are on the stone changes, and it changes, across the span of the quarry, but also in layers up and down the quarry, changes dramatically. And then you get to the Pine Quarry, and it's got a very, very different texture, very chalky, and it's used for Saccharine Concrete Company. And they've been finding just incredible sea urchins there. Some of them that we saw at an exhibit they had, it was a special exhibit, a limited time exhibit in Deckendorf. And they had these incredible sea urchins that were about the size of dinner plates.
yeah,
It was just spectacular.
yeah, with spines like, you know, like this, just incredible. And so so here you got a location with all sorts of urchins, but all sorts of pterosaurs and things too. It's just.
So Rene, you've mentioned, both of you have mentioned the different in the species from one quarry to the other. What's the theory behind why there is such a diversity and separation between the specimens at the quarries?
I think a lot of it has to do, if you remember those deep time maps, I think it has to do with how close you are to terrestrial land and also how close you are to the open ocean. And, in general, you don't find big things in these deposits because
Shallow marine basins.
yeah,
basically.
because I think a lot of the bigger things would have had the ability to get out of a basin or something and not get trapped in it. And either by a storm or maybe just the change in the climate or whatever. And so it's interesting that when you go from the east to the west, so you get to Eichstatt in the Solnhofen areas, you tend to get way more shrimps and crabs and insects and things like that. And then obviously, in the Solnhofen area, you've got 3 Archaeopteryx found there. So you had to have been fairly close to a bigger landmass, because Archaeopteryx was not a pterosaur. It didn't fly around like a pterosaur would. So it's interesting. Like I said, when I was talking about the quarries, there was some there was a quarry called Reed, and it's just known for starfish. So whatever the environment was there was just conducive for starfish. So you had those there. And
But it's just in the same token as we have within Maison Creek. You have certain areas, certain pockets where you tend to find certain types of creatures. And you don't tend to find big sharks or things, but you do find that maybe it was, you find bandringas, you find shark egg cases. Was it a nursery area because it was a shallow area? These are questions that we will continue to ask.
yeah.
If you can give me just one moment. I'm getting a little bit short on memory. We've got 2 recordings that are out in the cloud, so I'm going to go and stop recording at this point, but that doesn't mean that we're stopping questions.
Okay.
I know, before you ask your question, I know Alan has been waiting a long time and he keeps